And when you have near-death experiences, some people see their impact on other people.
Right. Oh,
They
right.
they become almost fused with the other person's experience of themselves.
Yes. Yes. I'm glad that you mentioned that. So not all, but a good chunk of near-death experiences involve these powerful life reviews where as you said, Bernie, people it's not just like your life flashing before your eyes in a second, as people often describe it, but um, you might see it very vividly, but often there were highlights from your life that were especially meaningful. But where people, there's also this incredible kind of empathy or perspective taking that happens where people will actually feel how the choices that they made and the things that they did affected other people. So they'll actually feel like if you said something cruel to someone, you'd actually see how it affected them and some of the ripples that it had on other people or relationships or future events. And I think that not only may people experience forgiveness or reconciliation as part of an NDE, but as you said, that life review often really makes people motivated to come back and repair relationships, or try to behave in ways that are going to be more loving and more kind toward others because they see that what we do in everyday life really matters. Like maybe some of your achievements or wealth or appearance or things that you thought, were so important, those are probably going to seem a little less important or maybe a lot less after an NDE. But even the little acts of kindness towards strangers, the little nice thing that you said to somebody in line at the grocery store, or the rude thing that you said to somebody out in the parking lot, that those things all really mattered. And I think that ends up being a really big lesson from NDEs for people.
Welcome to Connecting with Coincidence. We have a very, very interesting guest today, um, a person who is familiar with a lot of the research going on in the world about meaningful coincidences, and speaking in a general sense, where meaningful coincidences covers not only synchronicity and serendipity, but the near-death experiences and contact with people who have died, among other things. And it's a pleasure to be introducing and talking with you with Julie Exline. Julie Exline is the Bonner Lowry Professor of Psychiatry and Neurobiological Sciences, and the Director of the Division of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia Health Systems. Division of Perceptual Studies, sometimes called DOPS, is the only parapsychological academic research place in the United States. It's been around for quite a while. It's made a great impact on the way people think about reality. Before taking this position in July 2025, she spent 25 years on the Psychological Sciences faculty of Case Western University in Cleveland, Ohio. She has extensive research programs on spiritual struggles and spiritual attributions, along with a broad interest in extraordinary experiences around the life-death boundary, particularly after-death communications, near-death experiences, children's memories of possible past lives. Dr. Exline is also a licensed clinical psychologist and a spiritual director certified. Julie, thanks for
Oh,
being on the show.
thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure and privilege to be here.
Well, for us too. And let's start off with how DOPS, and now you only been there a year and you have other research to talk about. But DOPS is one of the central places in the world that helps humanity review and change our view of how reality works. We are no longer seen as an island among other islands, but our islands are connected to the turbulent ocean floor of our interconnectedness. So, how does your work, your personal work, and your work at DOPS influence not only your views of reality, but other people's who come in contact with the work of DOPS and your work? How does that influence the way they think about our maps of the territory of this reality?
That's a great question. I mean, I think what we're really trying to do at DOPS is to encourage people to be curious about the mysteries of extraordinary experiences, including things you would describe as coincidences, and not all, but a lot of them occurring around this life-death boundary. And I think the work that our group has been doing since our founding by Ian Stevenson in 1967 has really been focused not on offering proof of some particular view of ultimate reality, but of having people uh, be open and have information about the many, many different types of experiences, from things like near-death experiences or after-death communications to maybe telepathic abilities, like being able to read minds or um, project your consciousness to another place, like in remote viewing, um, or seeing the future, like in precognition. All these different things that we study, we're trying to investigate them in really careful ways that are really rigorous. And I think when people learn about the types of work coming not just out of our organization, but many other anecdotes and sources of research, it can really excite people and make them think, oh, maybe there's something beyond the physical or material world. Some people are much more reluctant to go there and are going to say, oh, you're not studying phenomena in the ways or using the measures or using the frameworks that are acceptable to us. So we're not going to change our opinions. Um, and for some people, these experiences can really provide more like a confirmation of a sense of something beyond. It could be a religious or spiritual worldview or some other view of interconnectedness. Learning more about the wide array of experiences that people have, um, that you'd put in this coincidence category, for some people can just really be a joy because it gives confirmation for a more interconnected view of the world that they're hoping is true.
Interconnected view of the world. Um, could you tell us what you mean by interconnected view of the world? What does that actually map out to you?
Well, I mean, I think the way that a lot of people would consider it is that, individual people or their minds or their spirits or souls have some type of connection that we can't necessarily measure or perceive with our physical senses. Some people are going to think about that more in terms of, like, I have a specific relationship with God or with my loved one who died, um, or I can read this one person's mind. So some people are going to think about it in terms of individual connections or like small group connections that are just seeming to be kind of beyond what you'd expect. Like you've written about some of the work with twins, for example, and the amazing um, phenomena that often occur there with people having the same thoughts at the same times or seeming to read minds, etc. But for some people, and people who've had things like mystical experiences, maybe in particular, there's often a sense of not only all humans, but maybe all of, you know, humans, animals, plants, matter, like all of everything being connected and sort of being a part of each other. Within theistic or God-focused frameworks, it might be seen as something like we're all a part of God, or God is in everything, or God has created everything and it's all connected, whatever it is. So I think people can think about it in a lot of different ways. Um, for me personally, I think a fun thing about thinking about a more fundamental level of interconnectedness, that maybe, everything is connected and that we all share, is I've found that to be a helpful way of having conversations and finding common ground with even people who hold um, like more materialist or physicalist worldviews. They might see things as being interconnected, at a quantum level, or at some physical level. And even if people aren't holding to a materialist or physicalist view of things purely, that common thread of seeing all as interconnected is something that we can still have conversations about. So it's nice to be able to have people who think that things are interconnected, maybe more spiritually, to be able to talk with people who see things as being interconnected in very foundational ways, what at a cellular level, or plants communicating, or evolutionary processes, et cetera. So I think, how could connection help but be a unifying theme?
Absolutely. It is a unifying theme. And that is what comes out of good data at the Division of Perceptual Studies, as well as the experience of a lot of people. Now, one of the, to me, amazing, meaningful coincidences happening in the world these days is the rapid increase in mystical experiences. There are lots of ways, or several ways, people have mystical experiences. There's these spontaneous ones where they just kind of happen. A friend of mine was walking around after eating a chicken sandwich in this parking lot, and he saw he he had a mystical experience, and they happen like that. And
Yeah, yeah.
they also happen to people doing a lot of meditating, and that's the purpose almost, to get out of here and get out there
Hmm.
from meditating. And then we have this psychedelic explosion. Of course, it happened in the 60s when a lot of people were getting out there in various ways, good and bad, and now it's getting to be commercialized uh, to get mystical experience as well as good therapy. But
Right.
one of the biggest increases has been caused by the medical technology. Medical technology has made it so you can study near-death experiences because people come back from almost being dead because the technology in the ICU and the CCU brings them back. And so you have Bruce Grayson doing a wonderful book and wonderful research on NDEs as part of Division of Perceptual Studies. So I wonder what you think about this outbursting of mystical experiences in the world now and what that impact is.
I think I'm really glad that you brought that up, because it was actually one of my favorite lectures that I would give back at Case Western in my psychology of religion and spirituality class. Was called Three Different Routes to a Mystical Experience. And we talked about meditation, we talked about psychedelics, and we talked about things like near-death experiences. Now, I didn't get to add the chicken sandwich one to the list, but that would have been fun. Um, I think that largely because of the emphasis on the boom of work on psychedelics, which I'm certainly interested into. We've done several papers and projects in that area. That's really helping to kind of rapidly proliferate some of the ideas about mystical experiences into the general public in ways that um, knowing that, like meditation research certainly shows that people can have mystical experiences through that, but a lot of people try to meditate and their mind wanders. They never have a mystical experience, or maybe you're looking too hard for the mystical experience, so then you can't find it. So um, it's something that I think that the psychedelic renaissance has helped to popularize. And I think for some people, I know this was the case for me, just learning about other people's mystical experiences, whether they were experienced through meditation or through psychedelics or through near death experiences, just reading so many accounts of those things for me was transformative in terms of my own worldview. It's like, okay, so many people are having these experiences in all these different ways. You know, that sounds that fundamental interconnectedness that people are describing as being, okay, like this was what was really real. It has that noetic quality that can be really persuasive. So I'm really excited that people are learning more about these experiences. Some of the cautions that I feel around it, especially with the psychedelic work, are that I think there's been so much emphasis on the mystical experience and how that's such a big predictor of the benefits of a psychedelic journey, that I think people can go into psychedelic experiences expecting to have a mystical experience, especially if it's done in a careful setting and they have all the right music and the right intentions, and you just never know what you're going to get with with a psychedelic experience. So and with meditation too, some people have had mystical experiences kind of early on, and that's part of what drew them to meditation. And then other people might be very disappointed because they are never able to uh, get there. So I think mystical experiences, even hearing about them secondhand, can be so powerful. But there can be a tendency toward experience chasing that I think can sometimes get any of us into trouble.
Definitely, definitely. There's something about wanting something and then letting go of that desire. That seems to be a basic operating principle in this reality.
Yeah.
So that we catch people up on what we're talking about. What are the characteristics, Julie, of a mystical experience?
Well, I'm not an expert on mystical experiences. I want to be clear about that. But very often, what people describe is an experience where not only do they perceive uh, maybe everything as being interconnected, as being one, but often kind of the boundaries of their own self, or what we might call the ego, sort of dissolves, and they kind of dissolve to become a part of this greater whole. And often, sometimes people experience it as sort of a void, and it can actually be a little scary. But then sometimes that can even transform into something that's more of a loving sense. And some people just go straight into a some type of experience that is the whole connecting force, and everything is about love. As people will often come out of the experience talking about that. So often people describe those experiences as being beyond words. Like, I can't really explain, but I know that it was like everyday life, where we see ourselves as being isolated and just have our own concerns, and we're working on this kind of material plane. People will sometimes say afterwards, okay, that I see now that is more of an illusion or a simulation, and this ultimate reality of interconnectedness is more what's really real. So it's that combination of not being able to put into words and seeing this as being the real thing, and feeling connected, that I think are so powerful. And a lot of times people have strong positive emotions like awe or wonder or love as part of those experiences too, gratitude.
Yeah. Well,
Mhm.
who wouldn't want to have an experience like that? Well, some people wouldn't, but some people would, and they chase them. But interestingly enough, there is now a fifth way, a fifth doorway that I found to mystical experiences, and it's through virtual reality. Uh, these guys can like make people who are apart from each other at a distance join together with their avatars on the screen, and they begin to merge with each other in ways that they then get to know each other in a depth that they wouldn't otherwise know. That to me is the striking part of these experiences. What they've done is use like one of the standard mystical experience measures,
Mhm.
uh, like the one that Walter Pankey uses based on Stace's ideas of what a mystical experience can be, several criteria, and they've used them, and some of the the experiencers in these virtual reality experience experiments match some of the outcomes for a moderate or better mystical experience.
Yeah, it's really cool to think of all the different routes that that people could use to get to these things. And for some people, like brain stimulation, like with some of these new neuromodulation techniques, there's a variety of different ways that that people can get there. But that's really interesting to learn about that VR work. I wasn't familiar with that.
Yeah, I was writing about mystical experiences with four doorways, and a friend of mine said, "Hey, Bernie, you might be interested in this."
Uh-huh.
While I was writing about it,
Mhm.
uh, and synchronicity helps me write this book on therapy for humanity, and this was an example. I just put it right in there because I looked it up and could summarize it, and I hope to talk to the guy who did it because this then expands the range, a potential range, without having to almost die or take a psychedelics, which some people are afraid of, and virtual realities are becoming more commonly acceptable. So this is quite another innovation toward this providing mystical experiences for humanity. And the impact is what I'm asking you about. To me, this is a form of meaningful coincidences when you get the same thing happening in different ways all over the world. That's a global seriality, I will call it, the series of the same thing or similar things happening at the same time. So this is a global seriality, a form of meaningful coincidences. And I wonder if I present it to you that way, Julie, how does that, how do you think about that as an impact? Because part of what you have researched is how do these strange experiences, which are not so strange, influence the way people think about what's real?
Mhm. Well, I think that for a lot of people, I mean, especially if you have one of these powerful experiences yourself, and not just, hearing about it secondhand, it really can shift people's fundamental views of the world. Like it might be hard to remember in daily life, to get back into the headspace of that mystical experience. But if you want to talk about, you know, a worldview that could really help humanity and help on our planet. I mean, what could be better than a sense of how we're all fundamentally interconnected? I mean, because if you think about, well, and not only that, but of, you know, s- the transcendence of the boundaries of physical death, if you want to go there as well. I mean, if you can get people to no longer fear death, to feel connected to others, to feel like there's a loving reality beyond things. If people can remember that and tap into that in daily life, I mean, just think of all of the uh, different, defenses and neuroses and bad habits that we get into individually because we're afraid of death or because we feel alone or isolated. So at an individual level, there's all of that potential. But then it's going to be harder to hold a grudge against somebody, to attack somebody, to ignore somebody, if you can again have some kind of powerful reminder of how you're actually connected to that person or that animal or even the plants or the earth. So I think anything that can um, make these views of our interconnectedness more alive to people um, can be really powerful, not just for us as individuals, but for how we relate to each other um, and to the world, and even our view of our own place in it. So I see there being so much transformative potential here. And I feel like the work that we're doing at DOPS is an important part of that, where a lot of what we're looking at are these amazing experiences around the boundary of life and death. But these insights about our interconnectedness are coming from so many other places too. As you said, those other forms of mystical experience, people getting more concerned about environmental issues, and in daily life, just experiences of love and connection with other people. I think what's challenging is keeping these experiences in mind. Some people have had the gift of one of these really life-changing, mind-blowing mystical experiences that can really shape their behavior, might really cause them to change their life priorities after, and they can go back to that. But for many of us, the experiences are more subtle, or they're secondhand, and it's harder in daily life uh, to remember them when we're stressed out.
Yeah, and there's good evidence about what you're talking about using psychedelics, for example, for depression.
Mhm.
Studies in England um, recognize that maybe 20-25% of the people who are depressed and come out of their depression using a psychedelic like psilocybin, um, then go back to being depressed after a couple of months. Why? Because they'll go back to the environment that was helping them be depressed.
Yeah,
So it
right.
becomes
Mhm.
harder to to stay there.
Yeah.
So, what do you think of that one?
Yeah, I think a lot of the research on psychedelics and their transformative effects is really compelling. But I think one of the um, one of the messages from the early research that might have gotten a little overblown is the idea that a lot of people, rated this as one of the most meaningful experiences of their entire lives, and there can be an implication that it's automatically going to become life-changing and that it's going to stick. And I think for a lot of people, even if they have a really meaningful, helpful psychedelic experience, might be mystical or other elements that are just really helpful to a person, um, there's just no guarantee that you're going to be able to continue to access that. Like you said, when you go back into daily life and are dealing with the different challenges and environments and things that you had before. So I don't think it in any way negates the power of the experience, but there are real questions about how we can harness the power of those and other experiences and have them brought back to mind for people, in ways that they don't just, you know, habituate to, or get kind of tired of, or having some sense of novelty around them, so that, oh yeah, yeah, that people can bring them back in a way that remains powerful and meaningful. That's tricky.
It's tricky, and a lot of the therapies with psychedelics try to do this integration thing,
Hmm.
um, where they try to help the person integrate. I was interviewing someone from England who was involved, a psychologist, in using psilocybin for depression, and I asked her about synchronicities. Do they happen? And she said, "Oh yeah, they happen a lot with in the groups of the therapists talking about what's happened with their clients. And they have a lot of synchronicities, and then some of the clients also have more synchronicities because there's the Bruce Grayson was able to show using one of my surveys that after an NDE, near-death experience, people see more synchronicities.
Hmm.
Well, after mystical experiences, they're going to see more meaningful coincidences also because they got tuned into things being connected. So
Yes.
I asked this person from England, well, maybe these synchronicities are ways to help the person continue to integrate their psychedelic experience. And her response just made me laugh. She said, "Oh, synchronicities are too woo-woo."
Oh.
So wait a minute. What do you think you're doing is okay? It's it's just
Mhm.
this meaningful coincidence is kind of like what the work adopts, which is now getting more acceptable. I mean, with so many years of just surviving at the University of Virginia because it was against the old paradigm, but now it's still there and it's still a fight, but it's not the way it used to be. So the idea that you can have communication with dearly departed, that you may something of what you may continue afterwards can be what you were just saying, Julie, as something that affirms your life here. You don't have to worry about being afraid of death. And there's this old phrase of you can't take it with you. Well, that may not be true. You can't take the cash with you.
Right,
That's
right.
what that usually is. But
Mhm.
you can take something of yourself with you.
Mhm.
That's a mind blower.
Yeah, and the name that researchers in this area tend to use is after death communications. I'm always kind of careful and I say perceived after death communications, because um, a lot of them might be, symbolic events or things like that some people might not necessarily believe are really happening. But this whole idea that people might be able to communicate with or get messages from departed loved ones is one that I was really surprised when I learned how common this is. There was some research done in a national survey by the Pew Research Center just a few years ago of U.S. adults, and they do really careful surveys where they get um, samples of the population that represent pretty well the people who are there. So they're not just going to like a class of college students or something. They're getting everybody. And depending on how you ask the question, um, over half of people in the United States said that, for example, if they had maybe felt the presence of a deceased loved one, that was well over half. And around half said that they felt like they had gotten a message from a deceased loved one. That's just the people who are willing to admit it. So, people can perceive the presence or a message from a loved one in so many different ways. And it kind of echoes some of the work that we did about a decade ago on people's perceptions of hearing from God, which was part of our work on supernatural beliefs and attributions. A lot of times people will see something like my dad just died and his favorite animal, a deer, I saw it three deer that, the next day out in the yard at three different times. And one of them came and looked at me in the window and, these types of things, or rainbows or other events. A lot of times people talk about electrical phenomena, like lights that won't switch on or switch off, or blinking lights, or pieces of electronic equipment that do really weird things, like a TV going on and off, or refusing to turn off, for example. Um, Sometimes people have dreams where they'll say, actually, it wasn't a dream. It's like my loved one was actually there in the room with me. Like I was asleep, but trust me, they were there and they told me something really important. Um, you might have thoughts drop into your head that you attribute to the person. You might smell them. Sometimes people will actually see their departed loved one or hear their voice audibly. That's more rare, but it does happen. So there are all of these different types of events that can happen that people see as being, they might interpret them just as coincidences, and I'm saying that in kind of the less powerful term, oh, it was random. Um, but for other people, they're deeply resonant and meaningful experiences. And that's where a person might go there and say, kind of like some people will say, oh, something was a message from God or a miracle. People might say here that, I think it was an after death communication. I think my loved one was actually saying something to me. It's amazing to know how common this is. And I think that can really comfort people who have these experiences just to know how common they are.
From a science perspective, or just a practical guy perspective, practical person perspective, if that communication tells you something you didn't know that was useful, that's to me the mark of knowing that there was a communication. It still could be precognition, that you're picking it up somehow. but if there's somebody who shows up and tells you something, and this has happened to me, told me something about somebody that I really cared about, a woman that I really cared about, told me something about her, specifically that she was a very difficult child. And when I told her that, she laughed and told me how difficult she was as a child.
Uh-huh.
And
Yes.
I mean, it's a probability estimate, but it was pretty clear that her father, Tim, was telling me that. Uh,
Yeah.
it's so when you have these experiences that are kind of veridical, that are real, um, it kind of is convincing when into yourself, and that's that's part of what's important in doing the research. Is like it does it tell you something you didn't know, and the Woodbridge Institute tests people by
Mhm.
stuff that you can prove that you've been told that you didn't know. But
Yeah.
I want to get to another question, Julie. You are what we call a clinical psychologist, um, and clinical means something like psychotherapy usually, uh, not always, but I'll assume that it means that to you. And one of the problems that we're facing as we talk about mystical experiences, um, and the oneness of it all is that us human beings don't get along together very well. Uh, we got problems in relating to each other.
Mhm.
We're technologically overdeveloped and interpersonally underdeveloped. And I wonder how you see the interconnectedness and the work of DOPS being able to help what I think is one of the fundamental problems in our current reality.
Well, those are some of the things that I'm most interested in getting into myself in research at DOPS. I used to be one of my main research areas was forgiveness for quite a long time. We had funding from the John Templeton Foundation about, gosh, it was like 25 years ago now, and studied forgiveness for quite a long time. And I think it's really interesting that not only the mystical interconnectedness or kind of general sense of interconnectedness or one mind that people might have, that could affect people's ability to get along with others. But sometimes people actually have parts of their experiences, like a perceived after death communication, or certainly a near death experience, where there are these themes of healing and redemption in relationships that have been broken. And I think that for some people, it can just be really amazing and transformative to to perceive yourself having some kind of exchange with a person where you had maybe been estranged or where there had been painful things that had never been resolved. And after a person dies, people will say, "Oh, it's too bad I never got to say the things I wanted to say," or "It's too bad we never got to apologize or forgive each other." Sometimes people actually will have those types of experiences. Um, and sometimes even in psychedelic experiences, these types of things can happen as well. So I think whether it's mystical experience, whether it's becoming just more open to the interconnectedness of people and all things, or these more specific kind of healing encounters, that they can all help to increase, our capacity to behave in loving ways in the world.
Yeah, as you're implying and almost saying, and when you have near-death experiences, some people see their impact on other people.
Right. Oh,
They
right.
they become almost fused with the other person's experience of themselves.
Yes. Yes. I'm glad that you mentioned that. So not all, but a good chunk of near-death experiences involve these powerful life reviews where as you said, Bernie, people, it's not just like your life flashing before your eyes in a second, as people often describe it, but um you might see it very vividly, but often or highlights from your life that were especially meaningful, but where people, there's also this incredible kind of empathy or perspective taking that happens where people will actually feel how the choices that they made and the things that they did affected other people. So they'll actually feel like if you said something cruel to someone, you'd actually see how it affected them and some of the ripples that it had on other people or relationships or future events. And I think that not only may people experience forgiveness or reconciliation as part of an NDE, but as you said, that life review often really makes people motivated to come back and repair relationships, or try to behave in ways that are going to be more loving and more kind toward others, because they see that what we do in everyday life really matters. Like maybe some of your achievements or wealth or appearance or things that you thought, were so important, those are probably going to seem a little less important or maybe a lot less after an NDE. But even the little acts of kindness towards strangers, the little nice thing that you said to somebody in line at the grocery store, or the rude thing that you said to somebody out in the parking lot, um, that those things all really mattered. And I think that ends up being a really big lesson from NDEs for people. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that.
Oh, you're welcome. And I'm glad you like the idea because there's more to it yet. It's the parking lot kindness, but it's the family relations that I'm talking about much more. That uh, not every family is like so nice and everything getting along very well. I mean, there are these families that seem to have it all together, but you look underneath and you don't know what you're going to find.
Sure.
There's a lot of conflict that often happens, and it's one of the versions is the grown up child being upset with the parents for the way they treated them, which is kind of a thing that happens quite a lot because
Yeah.
it turns out that parents aren't perfect.
Right, right.
It turns out it's kind of a funny thing to have to find out, but it is. And you've injured my inner child, might one person say. Um, and they're really mad, even though they're doing fine out there. And
Right, right.
that's just one of the things. So I'm talking about these close relationships and even the couples who might have problems, and one of them has to always give in to the other, however that works. To be able to get beyond those intimate difficulties.
Yeah.
Jealousy is a huge one that people get caught up with, for example. And
Mhm.
forgiveness, yes, that's a big one too, as you focused on. I'm a jealousy kind of guy, so I tend to be having to deal with that myself, which I've done reasonably well over the last many years. It's taken quite a while to reduce that, so it's not a big thing, as big a thing, so that when you can fuse with someone in an NDE, where you really get to feel what their experience of you is like,
Mhm.
and then be able to back away from that in your regular life and know that about them, to me is one of the fundamental things that DOPS might be helping humanity be able to do. There are other ways of doing it. And that's why I mentioned with those virtual realities, the same thing can happen in those virtual mystical experiences. And one of the other places that it happens is in shared death experiences,
Mhm.
where the person goes along with the dying person and experiences what that person experienced about them. So please comment on all this because the intimate ones are the ones that I think are the most problematic.
Yeah, thank you for raising that. I mean,
You're
I
welcome.
think, and as you're saying, um, a lot of times there's deep hurt, that we're all carrying through life, and there's often a lot of healing that takes place through these different experiences. Like something like a psychedelic experience. You could end up expecting a mystical experience, but then end up having a bunch of unresolved grief or interpersonal hurts come up instead. It wasn't what you were looking for, but it ends up being helpful to have those things brought to the surface, even though it's painful. Uh, and with something like a shared death experience, I mean, that's the work that William Peters and Monica Williams are doing. I'm hoping to work with them soon on developing a measure of these experiences. Um, you have people who uh, are maybe at the deathbed of a loved one and might actually get to go on part of the near-death experience with them and go to see deceased loved ones and maybe see the tunnel or wherever the loved one is going. I mean, that's pretty amazing. Um, Other people will have these visitations, another form of shared death experience where maybe I'm in another state and my dad dies and I roll over in the middle of the night and I see him standing in my room and he says like I love you or something, and then I find out that that's when he died. So a lot of times with these all these different experiences, as you said, it's not, yeah, it's certainly not limited to the small exchanges with strangers like I mentioned, even though those did matter. But it's it's the pain that we've experienced, the pain that we've caused others, and how can we relate to others in a way that is conveying the this greater love that we might have learned about, experienced, encountered through one of these transformative experiences. I mean, a lot of the healing that takes place, again, depending on the type of experience, is from people having an experience of just being so profoundly loved and safe. This is sometimes part of a mystical experience. Sometimes people will attribute it to God, sometimes the universe, or might just say, I don't know where it came from, but I felt completely loved and safe. I mean, you want to talk about a psychologically helpful thing because again, so many of our patterns that we get into in daily life that cause us so much problems are because of things like feeling unloved or unworthy and feeling insecure, in terms of our value, not being sure that anyone loves us or that anyone cares or feeling alone. Something like a powerful transformative experience like this could really just reassure a person at a deep level of that being loved and valued and help with that baseline feeling of security that helps us so much in everyday life. So for some people, it might be that they felt loved, accepted, forgiven themselves that ends up being so transformative. For other people, it might be kind of getting called out on the carpet for things that they did that were harmful or, to others, or just maybe experiencing the grief of a lost relationship, letting themselves experience that, and maybe having a chance to reconnect as part of that transformative experience. So there are so many ways that our human relationships can be uh, broken or strained, and it's incredible to me to think about the many ways that these transformative experiences can help to bring us back together. The trick is that you just can't count on it, so there's always has to be a certain amount of that room for surprise, uh, as you've written about with the meaningful coincidences. You can might be able to do certain things to set the stage, but you can't guarantee what you're going to get. I kind of think of it as like shaking up the snow globe or something, trying to set the stage for a good experience, um, and then you just have to see what happens.
And part of setting the stage requires paying attention uh, and curiosity. Those are interrelated phenomena, capacities human beings have. What we haven't gotten to, Julie, is the actual psychotherapy part of this, is that you can be deeply involved experiencing your impact on another person, but then you got to relate to them. Then you come out of it. Okay, so I have the feeling of what I've done and how the other person experienced me, but I still then have to change the way I'm relating to that other person. And it's that basic, I'll call it technology of interpersonal relations that psychotherapists have been working on for a long, long time. And we still have a lot of people coming to psychotherapy, including therapists. One of my favorite things is the only way to be in therapy without being the patient is to be the therapist. It's because therapists learn a lot from just being in therapy with somebody else.
Yeah,
We,
yeah.
and we and we do. So there's still this. How do you translate what we've been talking about into actual day-to-day interaction?
Yeah, I mean, this is a lot of the heavy lifting that happens for people after they've had a transformative experience like this, especially if, maybe they found out that they are getting, they're feeling like a need or led to leave an abusive partner or to make amends to somebody that they've harmed. That's going to be hard work. Like even being able to draw on the power of the experience itself, and that might give you a strong sense of motivation and desire, and you can see why it's important to do this heavy lifting and this hard work, but you just can't change the fact that it's really hard work to forgive somebody, to apologize, to to work to reestablish trust with another person. Uh, this
Uh,
is this is
let's
there's no
let's
shortcuts to that stuff.
let's stay with that one. I mean, forgiveness is yes, definitely one thing. Trust is a really complicated thing. Uh, and would you tell me what you mean by trust?
I think trust has to, so whereas forgiveness has more to do with resolving like your bitter, resentful feelings towards someone or releasing them. Trust has more to do with expectations about how someone's going to behave in the future. So kind of looking at their past behavior, past things that have happened, other things you've heard about a person, other things you believe about them. Uh, how do you think that they're going to behave in helpful ways in the future and not in harmful ways? And a lot of times reestablishing trust requires a lot of evidence. So if you're trying to show someone else that you're trustworthy, it might take a very long time of behaving well, being responsive, having integrity, um, behaving in ways that really show care for that person. it that can take a long time to establish, and it might take a long time if you're on the other end to be able to trust another person or group. Again, you have to really see enough evidence that they're going to behave in helpful ways, and that can take a very long time. Some people just might not be able to get there. Some people are going to have trouble trusting others in general often based on their own early life experiences. But for other people, you might be somebody who tends to trust most people, but you just know that there are certain people or groups that you can't trust because you've seen how they exploit or harm. So trust is always a tricky thing because uh, it's based on expectations, and you want your expectations about other people to be hopeful and not um to not ever rule out the possibility of redemption, on somebody's part, but you still need to be realistic.
You still need to be realistic. What you've described as the criteria, let's say, of trusting, I've listed it in this way. It sounds familiar to what you were saying, but uh, you're not going to hurt me, you're predictable,
Mhm.
and you want to help me.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's
Mhm.
similar to what you were describing, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, definitely.
So I indirectly contacted Ian McGilchrist, a psychiatrist in England, um, who's part of the Scientific and Medical Network. And I, I told him just what my definition of trust was because he wrote an article about we need to regain trust. And he said, "You've stumbled over the first hurdle." So I said, hmm, I wonder what that means. Well, I went back to mystical experiences, and there is a surprise in mystical experiences. There's what you've described, but the reason people did meditation was to get away from this reality here. They, in the old days, this was pretty miserable, and you want to get out of here. And mystical experiences like taking psychedelics 73 times and exploring how the universe operates uh, is a way of getting away. But how do you bring that back to here? And to me, the mystical surprise was the joy of embodiment,
Mhm.
of being actually here on Earth.
Yeah,
This, the mystical experience, instead of way out there the way it used to be, as the reason, now it's, boy, it's fun being in a body. It's
yeah,
fun being here. So, what McGilchrist was trying to say is the body, the right hemisphere, he would like to say, picks up whether someone is trustworthy or not before you come up with all the left brain rationalities. And since then, I've become much more tuned in to whatever the body energy is with someone to feel that as well as using the criteria as a way of confirming what my body is picking up.
yeah. I mean, that's a fascinating topic. Um, the idea that, there's a part of us which, some might attribute to the right brain. I'm not a neuroscience person. I'm a little cautious about making the really
I
strict
am too. I am too. But
distinction
he
between
just
right and left.
he loves doing that.
Yeah,
But
but so I'm a little cautious about that. But it is interesting the kind I like the idea though of the kind of the wisdom of the body, and it's the first impressions that you might have of a person, or sometimes people talk about like getting the vibe of what's going on in a room or with another person. And I think of it as those kind of intuitive that intuitive information that's coming in that then we have to kind of backpedal with some other part of our mind to kind of give logical reasons for it. It's one of the things I remember reading about in books on discernment, which was part of my when I went through training to become a Ignatian or Jesuit spiritual director. These are people who kind of try to help see how God or the divine might be interacting with you in daily life and kind of helping people to be on the lookout for that and attuned to that. Some of the most important work that happens in spiritual direction is in the area we call discernment, where people are trying to make important life decisions. And a lot of the writings on that, Elizabeth Liebert, for example, wrote a nice book on it, talks about the different pathways of discernment where there's like the logical mind, there's advice from other people, there's maybe like lists of pros and cons. Uh, if you're a faith-based person, maybe scriptures, but the wisdom of the body was a really big part of it. And I know that in my own life, when I've had some really major decisions to make, I did lots of the analytical work, lots of consultation, journaling, all of that. But the wisdom of the body ended up being an important confirmatory thing. This is like what it came down to. You think about a couple of different options that you're facing. Which one, you know, which one would you instinctively go toward? Or how does your body feel when you think about option A or option B? Does it feel heavy? Or does it feel like light and excited? What are the different things that come up? So that kind of relates to what you were saying when you were the talking about it in relation to trust. I think more broadly, the wisdom of the body is importantly related to what we're talking about here, including, of course, all of our interconnectedness with all that's around us being centered in our physical body is important too, because this is the body that we've got while we're here. So it's pretty important too.
and this body came out of the nature that we are immersed in, and
Yeah.
humanity has forgotten that these days. And part of what I'm writing about, basically what I'm writing about, is coming back to Gaia, to nature, humanity rejoining our own mother, uh, and that becomes a major theme in therapy for humanity.
Yeah,
Well,
I
we
think I think the Gaia beliefs and some of the even the more animist beliefs that a lot of people hold, and that people often have animist experiences, meaning like objects or things talking to them, like in mystical experiences or psychedelic experiences, um, can be so powerful and a really um, visceral way to help people feel more connected to the earth in ways that I think might really help us take care of the earth. So I didn't mean to cut you off. I just had to jump in and say that.
Oh, I'm glad you did, because I can say we are of the earth. We are made from the earth. And that's it's a bottom up way of demonstrating interconnectedness that you just clarified for me that I hadn't quite put together. Uh, so thank you for that.
Welcome.
Thank you for that as well. Well, we've come to the end of our time together, and it's been delightful, Julie. It really has been talking.
Likewise.
Good. Thank you for being with me. And is there one more thing you'd like to have our audience know before we stop?
Yeah, I really appreciate your attention to our organization, the Division of Perceptual Studies. We're
Yeah.
at the University of Virginia, have been here since 1967.
Wow.
And one thing that people might not know is that even though we're at the university, we're entirely externally funded, and most of that is private donations. So if anybody listening is excited about these topics or about our work at DOPS, just want to um, draw your attention to our website, and we'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
And your newsletter is very informative.
Yes, we have a monthly newsletter that comes out. We'd be happy to put you on the mailing list if you just get to the website and get send an email to our main address.
I'll put the email into your bio so they can also have that there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, thank you again, Julie, for being with me today. It was it was really a lot of fun.
I
Really,
loved it. Thank you so much for having me, Bernie. This is a great opportunity, and just really appreciate it.
you're very welcome, Julie.